Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of season 1, Huffer and Friends. This month we're doing a focus on marriage, and we've produced some content on marriage and some Q&A stuff. Hopefully today we'll be having someone from our church, The Gathering, share their own testimony about their own marriage. And I'm super excited about the couple. One of my friends is going to be with you today. Their name's Stephen Tweed and Elizabeth Jeffries Tweed. They are very, very successful in their own rights, in their own business. Stephen has the leadinghomecare.com. He has grown that into the leading resource for facts, data, information, and knowledge of the industry sector we call home care. Our clients, mastermind members, and newsletter subscribers provide in-home personal care to older adults. And that home care has become the fastest growing sector of healthcare in America. Is an author, professional speaker, leader in his field, member of several boards over the years. And then his wife, Elizabeth Tweed Jeffries, is a keynote speaker, has worked with CEOs, vice presidents, directors, has had over 1 million people come to one of her 4,000 presentations, from General Electric to the Crystal Cathedral to American Hospital Association and to the famed Churchill Downs. She's an author, speaker. But what I love most about Elizabeth and Jeffrey and Stephen is their commitment to serve at the Gathering Christian Church in whatever needs arise. And one of those needs that have come up is that we would love for them to share their story of their testimony of their marriage. Marriages are tough, and they've had high highs and low lows. And I'm excited for you to hear from two very successful people in their own industries come together, have a marriage, and work through tough seasons in order to see that marriage thrive. And so please enjoy this time together with us. If you like what you're hearing, you can like this podcast, comment, or subscribe to get more content like this. And I think you're going to really be in for a real treat with Elizabeth and Stephen.
Okay. Well, I'm the Elizabeth part, and we are from Louisville, Kentucky, is our original home, and Naples, Florida. And we've been down here in our winter place for eight seasons now. So you can see when we talk seasons, you know when we get here, but we come and go. And that's who we are. We are business partners as well as married for 33 years coming up. In June will be 33 years. Wow. Where did it all go? And who are you?
And I'm Stephen Tweed. And as Liz said, we've been married for 33 years. We've been business partners. We met through our National Speakers Association, our professional society. We both have as part of our business speaking professionally. And we have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, and we love being here at the Gathering. We actually found out about the Gathering from our home church in Louisville, which is Southeast Christian Church, which is a very, very large mega church. And we saw it on the screen at the announcements one Sunday, and we said, Monica and Cy planting a church in Naples. We said, we got to find out about that. And so we looked it up, and they introduced us to Eugene DePorter, who's our minister of church planting. And of course, you know Eugene, and we reached out to you and Monica, and here we are. We're so delighted to be part of what you are building at the Gathering.
Yeah. And that's been that's about a year and a half.
It was in the spring of 23 that we saw it, and then we reached out to you, and we happened to be down here in the summer, so we had breakfast, and here we are continuing to support you.
I want people to know
just
about
what you're doing awesome, and these wonderful people that are coming
and Elizabeth,
to the
you guys have been supportive to me and Monica just personally. We came to start this church and didn't really know anybody. We landed in Northeast Naples, and we get an email actually from Elizabeth, I think it was, just saying, hey, we're from Southeast. Our church is supporting you, which Southeast Christian is a huge supporter of ours down here in Naples. They have members from Southeast that's on our management team, our board, that help just oversee me and help me with my leadership and give resources and also point financial resources. And they give us media to use for our sermon series. We did a sermon series that Southeast did. We did it at the Gathering, and they gave us the bumper videos and artwork. I'm sure you guys recognized that as you were here for our One at a Time series. But also, Stephen and Elizabeth have just been great advocates and support for me and Monica. And so in our marriage, in our leadership, you all have encouraged us, you've challenged us, you've inspired us. And so we are just so grateful for your ongoing support of our church plant, this new little baby church. And so we thank you so much for what you've done. One of the questions I want to ask you, what keeps you coming back? What keeps you engaged at the gathering?
Well, I think there's two things, Cy. The first one is we love the worship there, and we love your preaching.
Yeah.
And one of the things we learned from our 40, 35 years at Southeast Christian is the importance of good preaching. You've met Bob Russell, you know Dave Stone, you know Kyle Eidelman, and we have been blessed with amazing preaching. And I believe that that's part of what helped Southeast grow from 50 families planted by South Louisville Christian Church 60 years ago, I guess, to growing from 50 families to 30,000 members on 15 campuses. And so the preaching that you have will be part of attracting people, the worship, the music, and then it's the community. Monica's always out there at the gathering place, greeting people. Your in-laws are there at the front door greeting people, and it's just a warm, welcoming place. And so the combination of those factors makes the gathering a special place, and I see it growing sort of in the same magnitude as what we have experienced at Southeast.
One of the things I'm excited about today doing is we are, after Easter, we're going to be doing a series on marriage, and we're going to be diving deep into like that key relationship that so many people enter into. And so many people have had bad experiences with a married couple, whether that being their own marriage, whether that being their parents' marriage, a friend's marriage. Marriage, when it's going great, is one of the most incredible relationships that you can have. And when it's not going great, it can basically taint everything and anything that you are doing or a part of because of that key relationship. And so I wanted, and you all were willing to share your own story, your own testimony about your highs and lows as a married couple. And so thank you for doing that and being vulnerable in this way. And so I'd like to just start off with like, what's your love story? How'd you meet? When did you get married? What attracted you to each other? That kind of stuff.
Well, we do have a fun story, Cy, and I mentioned that we met through our National Speakers Association. So in the summer of 1990, we were at our convention in Atlanta. I was in a breakout room. Elizabeth was speaking. Like we often do afterward, I went up and said, hey, that was a great message, and I really loved it. And oh, by the way, I'm working with a hospital in Louisville. I'm coming there in a couple of weeks. Let's have a meal together. She said, fine, call me. Well, I called, and she had no recollection of meeting me. Talk about powerful first impressions. But she reluctantly agreed to have a meal, and we did after my meeting with the hospital leadership team in the coffee shop of a hotel across from the airport. And we agreed to meet again in a couple of weeks, which we did. And that second meeting turned into sort of a real date. And we agreed that we had a wonderful connection and that we would continue to see each other, even though I lived 600 miles away in outside of Philadelphia and she was living in Louisville. So clearly that the Lord had his hand in this meeting. This was not an accident or a coincidence. And probably the fun part of the story is that at that first gathering, we were sitting in a park in Louisville, feeding the ducks and talking about the speaking business. Wow. And we had just each written our first book. And we had exchanged books at that first evening meal at the hotel. And so it was 3 weeks later, I guess, we're back together. We're sitting in the park talking about speaking. And my first book was called Strategic Focus Game Plan for Developing Competitive Advantage. And so Elizabeth had read my book. She said, would you help me focus my speaking business? I said, sure, I'd be happy to help you focus your speaking business. She asked a difficult question. She said, what would you charge? Now, what do you say? You're sitting in the park with this attractive woman. You're not sure if this is a business meeting or a date. And she says, what would you charge? Well, I handled that question much like I have handled most difficult questions in our relationship. I avoided it completely. I did not answer the question, and we went off and did some other things, and I did my meeting with my client, whatever. A month later, we were together at Thanksgiving, and she did not forget. However, she changed the question. So instead of what would you charge, in Elizabeth's amazing questioning skills, she changed the question to what would it take for you to help me focus my speaking business? And I said, what it would take is a round trip airplane ticket from Reading, Pennsylvania to Louisville, Kentucky. She said, I can do that. And we did that. And in January of 1991, I flew to Louisville for the weekend. And on Saturday morning, I went to her home in her office, and we went downstairs, and I put up a big storyboard, a foam board with some markers and index cards. And I put up a card that said Elizabeth's Future View 2000. Now, this is January 1991. So we're looking out 10 years. And I said, tell me what you want your business to look like 10 years from now. And she started talking, and I started writing, and I'm pinning all of these up on the board, but then went from business to finance to fun to family to faith. And within an hour and a half, we had this whole board filled with 3x5 index cards, and we arranged them and created a word picture of what she wanted her business and her life to look like in 10 years. And then it really got weird. And I said to her, Elizabeth, I said, if you were to take your name down and put my name up, the vision would be the same. And then it really got weird. And I looked at the board, and I looked at Elizabeth, and I went over and knelt down beside her desk chair, and I said, Elizabeth Nardi Jeffries, will you marry me? And she was speechless. Never happened before, never happened since.
Wow.
But she reluctantly, after a few minutes, said yes. And that started the journey. And so there are a couple of messages there. One is when you have a clear mental picture of what you want your life to be like, and there's some key elements in there, one of which was faith. She was very clear that faith was an important part of her life, and I was as well, even though we came from different faith backgrounds. She grew up Catholic, was still active in her Catholic church. I grew up Methodist. I was active in a Presbyterian church in Pennsylvania, and then when I married and moved to Louisville, we were sort of figuring that out, and eventually we ended up at Southeast Christian. So
that's right.
When you see the vision, then you can come together and you can figure out how to make it work.
Did he get the story right, Elizabeth? Did he
All
leave
that
any
happened
important
in 3
details
months,
out?
by the way. Yeah, he did. He did.
Yeah.
He's told that story from the platform in front of thousands of people. It's hilarious because I really didn't remember any of it, and I left the convention and I went off on an international trip with my niece and came back and had all these messages from this guy that I looked him up in the directory, and he had a mustache and he had long sideburns and long hair and all this, and I'm going, I don't know this guy, who is he? So it's really, the Lord makes us laugh. It's just been fun. And it took us about 1.5 years to figure out, because I was willing to move to Pennsylvania, and it just was not working out. Everything was twice as expensive. I was traveling a lot, flying, and I needed to be close to an airport, and it's not that easy if you're around the Philadelphia area. Everything not only was expensive, it just took a long time. So then one day in January of 92, he called and he said, I'm moving to Louisville. I said, I like that. Because I had already been in Louisville about 15 years, because I'm from Chicago originally. Stephen's from Pennsylvania. We met in Atlanta. We live in Louisville and Naples. So travel has been an interesting part of our lives. A big part. Yeah, we are.
Now you are from Philadelphia, Stephen, is that right?
We have a lot in common. We have a real lot in common.
I grew up in a little tiny town in central Pennsylvania, went to undergraduate and graduate school at state universities, was living in western Pennsylvania, then moved to the Philadelphia area when I launched my business. So when we met, I had just moved to Reading,
okay,
town
good.
Outside of Philadelphia.
We had gotten along really well for a long time. I haven't asked you that question yet. So I'm being a Cowboys fan. That would have been a hard. That would have been a hard stop if you were an Eagles fan.
Hurt our relationship if I tell you that I'm a Steelers fan?
No, I'm kidding. I have lots of great Eagles fan friends here now. So, love the story. Wonderful, just way you guys met, how you ended up getting married and starting life together. One of the things that I wanted to jump into was just, I know, just hearing from yourselves, your own self-admittance, like we've had some tough times. And so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about like the kind of vulnerable piece of your marriage. Like what are some of the challenges or challenging season you went through in your marriage? And we always acknowledge that there's an enemy that's out to destroy us. So how did that enemy, Satan, wreak havoc on your relationship?
Well, this is really why we are so passionate about marriage, because it's easy for us to say now at this point, maybe almost 20 years later, that we have a redeemed marriage. And we tell people that, and because we're marriage mentors through our church there at Southeast, and we have several couples a year we walk alongside. We were actually marriage mentors for how long? 5 years or so, walking alongside couples who were already married, having challenges. And that was really difficult. And I'm sure you know that, Si. You walked along and helped, it was really tough.
Yeah.
Many of them did not make it. The ones that did was a huge celebration. And and then we moved into the pre-marriage, which is what we're in now, and it's a lot more fun. It's also it's also very interesting. So we are passionate. It's the first thing, because we're both professionals. We have lots of skills in relationships and communication that we use in our business. And quite honestly,
I know where you're going with this.
I really thought we're going to just sail through this. This is going to be, thank you, Lord, because, we have really got a great foundation of our faith, and we've got a great foundation of our skills. And when we got into some of our earlier disagreements, it was devastating to me, particularly because I just didn't think it was going to be that hard. You go ahead and tell.
We were having a discussion at one point, a tiff, and I was watching her behavior, and I realized, and I said to Elizabeth, "You thought this was going to be a cakewalk, didn't you?" And she said,
"Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be this hard." I had been single for, by the way, and we always need to say each of us have been married before. And so I was single for about 11 years. I was building my business, doing great on my own, very, very, very independent. And when we met, it was really pretty much instantaneous. And so even though it was actually about a year and a half before we married, we spent a fair amount of time together. And this was before cell phones, before a lot of the internet. And so we talked on the phone a lot. We talked through all sorts of things and, felt really like we were really on pretty solid ground. And we went through some pretty tough times. And, the thing that when we look back and recognize we really had none of the issues that most people have in marriage. We had no financial issues. We both had great careers. We're doing wonderfully financially. We had solid homes that we came from. We had lots of friends and family that loved each other. My family is crazy about this guy, and vice versa. We had none of that. Professionally, personally, faith-wise, health-wise, you name all of the things. We were great. We had, as we worked through many of our stuff, one of the big thing we realized, we had, each of us individually had very severe pride issues. That was the biggest thing for us. The stubbornness, the control issues, the independence, the, what else, honey?
Well, I think just the unwillingness to apologize, to accept responsibility. And
that was only you, though.
Well, that's true. Since then, I've learned the answer is yes, I agree. I'm sorry.
He's done really well. And listen, that's just silly, but it's the truth. He had a really hard time apologizing or acknowledging his part. I had a hard time acknowledging my part. It was really hard. In fact, we will say we got to a point about 20 years ago when we said, this is just not working. And I drew a line in the sand and said, we're either going to fix this or I got to get out. This is so unhealthy. It was toxic for both of us. And so I had the conversation, and I used all of my professional skills to say, this is not working, kept my voice down. I did all the right, it was picture perfect. But the outcome was, you need to make a decision. You either want to be married, and if you do, then we need to work on this together, or I'm going to just go ahead and leave. I'm going to leave. And so he said, so are you drawing a line in the sand, which, by the way, you never do with Stephen Tweed? That is not a good thing. And I said, yes, I am. And so I said, this was on Holy Thursday. We were on an airplane on our way back from California where we were both speaking.
Wow.
And I said, you have until Sunday morning to tell me, is your stake in the ground? Are we going to do this or not? And so I patiently waited, and I was kind of planning in my head what I was going to do and how I was going to live my life. And on Sunday morning,
the Lord spoke through me and said, Elizabeth, will you marry me again? And we recommitted and
put our stake in the ground.
Put our stake in the ground and recognized that that's what our faith required. Then we had a lot of work to do to put the pieces back together. And one of the pieces was we were attending a home study with others from our church, working through Emerson Eggerich's book and videos, Love and Respect. And it impacted both of us, but it really affected me because we're all familiar with the verse from Ephesians that says, husbands, love your wives. What we don't pay attention to is the next phrase that says, wives, respect your husbands. And when we went through the love and respect class, and particularly the crazy cycle, it hit me that said, part of my issue, and again, it goes back to what Elizabeth said about pride, was not feeling respected. But I couldn't voice it. I couldn't put language to it. I didn't know what it was, but I know how it felt. And once we understood, and once we learned about breaking out of the crazy cycle, then we were able to deal with it. And we still have episodes of the crazy cycle, but we recognize it. We're able to step back very quickly and to be able to say, gee, it feels like you're upset. Did something that I say or do was unloving? Or she will say, gee, it looks like you're upset. Is there something that I did or said that makes you feel disrespected? And so having the language to put on it and having the awareness has helped us to work through issues much more quickly. Where it used to be hang on for 2 or 3 days or a week, now it's minutes or hours.
If you're not familiar with
so that's been a huge
in Love and Respect, it's a book worth getting and reading with your spouse, because what Stephen just communicated is gold, is absolute gold. The crazy cycle, if I remember correctly, is each of us have buttons that get pushed. And those buttons get pushed accidentally most of the time by your spouse, by doing something that made you feel unloved or disrespected. And then if we don't know that button gets pushed, it's our natural tendency to react. And typically how we react is not wise or is not caring, and it pushes our spouse's button. And then when their button gets pushed, they react, which pushes your button, and that's the crazy cycle. And so you have to be able to stop the crazy cycle somehow. And what Stephen, you just described of saying, hold on, I see that you're upset. Is there anything I've done that has made you feel disrespected or unloved? That is such a key question to ask. And it's a way to not let the enemy spin you out of control, but says, no, I'm going to stop, and I'm not going to jump on that train again, right? I'm going to make sure we halt it and figure out what I have. And I think that was the other thing, that I am very defensive in my marriage. I'm just like, why are you upset? My thinking is, if I can just clarify real quick, you wouldn't be upset anymore. And Monica's like, I don't need you to clarify. I need you to care. That's kind of her thing. So if you can get out of that cycle by asking that question and focusing, what you did probably wasn't intentional, acknowledging that and saying, okay, that you are feeling a certain way by my actions, and I'm so sorry that's where I think that can come and get you not getting on that crazy cycle again. What's interesting is that typically when you're in marriage and you're pushing each other's buttons, you're learning about your own buttons, and you have to dig into your past. You have to dig into your own baggage that you're bringing to the relationship that has a button there in the first place. And so how did learning more about yourself, your own baggage, your own private battles and struggles, how did that play a role in your journey as a couple, that self-discovery?
I spent a lot of time in the 80s. I did a lot of personal work. That was when I was single. And, to back up here a little bit, when I look back, I had a lot of personal work to do. My family of origin very traditional Italian Catholics, west side of Chicago. My father was the Don. He ran everything. My mother acquiesced to everything, how she lived all those years and took care of 4 kids and the family and all. And so I when I look back, I had no idea what marriage really was. I never saw a healthy marriage anywhere until I was well into adulthood with some friends of ours that they're still our best friends that have now been married 66, 67 years. I don't know, something like that. We've traveled with them extensively, and then we started to see other marriages. That was one of the big things that helped us, is seeing healthy marriages and how people interacted. Well, wait a minute, we don't do that. So I had a lot of work to do around my dad, because he had a very severe alcohol problem and affected our family and everything. So I had a lot to do with that, what I call the feeling of being invisible. Plus the fact that I'm 5 feet tall, and I tend to be a little strong, in case you don't know that by now. And so I had to speak up for myself to be seen and heard. And so I needed to be heard and seen by Stephen. And so our tendencies are both very different, which is part of God. I think I always say it's part of God's plan. It's part of our spiritual development plan. So I tend to be more on the emotional relationship side. And Stephen really, at that time particularly, tended to live in his head. He's a business strategist, and he's excellent at it. That's why he's excellent at it. So we each had to meet somewhere along the way to say, well, wait a minute, this is really great, and this is really great. How about if we look on balancing some of this with each of us? And when I was very blessed. I had, and still am, a part of a group of women. There were 5 of us, called the Summit Sisters. These women are still today amazing. One of them has already gone to heaven. We've been together 30 years, and we're in different, 2 of us in Louisville, 2 in Phoenix, 1 in Hawaii. And they were my stalwart. These Christian women who grew up in the church, which, I really didn't. I always knew about Jesus, but I didn't really know Jesus and build that relationship until probably the early 90s, when we joined Southeast, is when I think we both started really growing that relationship. But these women stood by me and talked to me, cried with me, laughed with me, supported me, encouraged me, because I was ready to throw in everything. Just get me out of here. The pain was so bad. And so with that support, and then Liz Curtis Higgs, and I don't know if you know Liz or know her name. She's incredible. She's there in Louisville, and one of my best friends. And Liz gave me a huge Texas-size fly swatter. And what she said was, here's what I want you to do. I want you to run through the house, and you tell Satan to get out of your home. Satan does not belong in your marriage. I still have this fly swatter. And by the way, we've given fly swatters to some of our couples to just swat him out of here. Satan, you are not in our marriage. Get out of here. This is not your home. This is the home of Jesus. And so a lot of these pieces that helped us to understand really what marriage was as a faith Christ foundation marriage. And that's when we decided, after we had some help ourselves from the marriage ministry, and then we have been a part of it. And we've been a part of that now, I guess, maybe 15 years or so in various ways. But that has been a big help to us, interestingly enough, because we're there and we're mentoring, and we've been trained in it. We're not counselors, but we're mentors. And we sit it around our table with a couple, and we learn every single time we sit around that table with them. And I've learned more about Stephen, because if I can just zip my mouth and give him space, that's one of the things I constantly work on, is because he's such an introvert and I'm just out here a little more, than to allow him to ask the questions of these couples or to make suggestions. I've sat there many times going, wow, that is really cool. That is really good. And so watching him in those situations I just fall in love with him all over again. I mean, it's really true. Great. And so that has been really good for us, being in this ministry. But we are
Yeah.
huge advocates for marriage,
And one of the things that I was going to ask you about
and
was what
share our
helped you get
testimony
through that
pretty
season.
easily
And it sounds
these
like,
days.
for sure you went to some kind of class, love and respect in your church. Did you go to counseling ever? Did you do any kind of other marriage mentors? Did you have marriage mentors yourselves?
There's a couple of things. We did have some counseling.
Yeah.
At that point, this was very early on, so they were not necessarily Christian
Yeah.
counselors. And so one of the things I would suggest is to couples is find a good Christian counselor. But it was, first of all, putting that stake in the ground around our faith and saying the Lord wants us to be together and he wants Satan out of our marriage. And so we're going to make the commitment. Then it was figuring out the pieces. There was a couple at that time in our church at Southeast who had gone through a very public experience where they separated, they didn't divorce, they were apart for many years, and then they came back together and they have become huge advocates for marriage. And so when we were going through one of our rough spots, Elizabeth called Cassie Soti is her name, and she and George were really the force behind the marriage mentor program at our church. And we literally went and sat in their living room and they personally counseled us, which was a stepping point, and then that led to some other positive things. The other thing is Elizabeth mentioned her Summit Sisters, and one of the women in that group is the wife of another good friend, Jim and Naomi Rohde, who we knew very well from the National Speakers Association. And when we were planning to get married, we knew that the fact that both of us were in the business and independent, that we would have some issues. And so we identified 3 other couples who were like us in the profession of speaking, and we made appointments with them. And I remember sitting with Jim and Naomi at dinner in Palm Beach, California during our convention and sharing with them and asking for their guidance. And Naomi said something that I wrote down and I have repeated dozens of times with other couples. Naomi said, to have a strong marriage, you need to do 3 things. You need to read the Bible, you need to attend a Bible-based church, and you need to hang out with other Christian couples. And one of the things that we learn in both of our experiences is that divorce is contagious.
Oh, yeah.
And when people are on the verge of divorce, they hang out with other people who are on the verge of divorce.
And miserable.
And they talk each other into divorce. And if we hang out with Christian couples, they will talk us into staying together, even if they don't know what we're going through, just the presence. And so we share that with every couple we talk with. We share that with our Christian friends because we do exactly that. We have several close friends who are not Christians and whose personal values are almost the opposite of ours, but we love them anyway. But the vast majority of people that we spend time with are other Christian couples from our church in Louisville, from our National Speakers Association, people that we know around the world. And so that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And one of the things in those relationships, it's very clear that we pray for each other's marriages and we pray for protection. We protect so that we will speak truth in love to each other if we see something that says, wait a minute, and it's respected and expected that we're here for each other's marriages too. And when we were going through tough stuff, besides the one couple Stephen mentioned, one of my really good friends, because people didn't really know what we were going through. We were not sharing this except around this table with my Summit Sisters. But one of my other close friends, so she called Stephen when I told her, she called Stephen and she had long conversation with you.
Well, we went to lunch.
You went to lunch.
At the restaurant.
And she really...
And Naomi did the same thing when she was in town. Yeah. So 2 of Elizabeth's female friends carefronted me, and we went to lunch and had in-depth conversation.
We were just Monica and I were just at a retreat for all the church planners in Florida, and they brought in a counselor named Dwight Bain. He's a leading counselor in Florida, and he made a statement that I'll never forget was, you don't just need a group of friends that has your back. A group of friends that has your back is great, but you need a group of friends that has your front, meaning they'll confront you.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's when you have loving friends that are willing to say the hard truth, like, I know that you're upset about this, but you might be part of the problem. That's hard to do. It's easy to be someone's, oh, he's terrible, or oh, yeah, she's crazy, or whatever. But it's hard to look at your friend and go, I see your husband's perspective, or I see your wife's perspective, and you might want to, you need to change that. You need to look in the mirror. And yet that's the friend that's worth gold. And it sounds like the Summit Sisters were that, and you guys had people, another couple in your church that were part of that. Yeah, that's great.
And they still are. And you never saw anybody celebrate so much. I'm going to get emotional. What Naomi had said, and we see them regularly, even though they're in Phoenix. We're going to be traveling with them this June, but they're the ones that have been married 60. They'll be married 67 years because she spoke at our wedding. She did the story of Naomi, and anyway, they've been friends forever. And all she kept saying was, "Look at what you would have missed. Look at these 20 years that we would have missed if we had not kept our stake in the ground." And Sai, we are so incredibly blessed right now. One of our friends is speaking she's speaking somewhere, and her question to maybe a dozen of us was, what has been your best year? And we asked both of us, and we each answered at different times and wrote it down through email. And we both said the same thing. It's right now. It's literally right now where we are so incredibly blessed with your 7Fs. Why don't you say that? The things that we're...
When we did the storyboard of Elizabeth's Future View 2000, and then we organized those index cards into some categories. And later, as we went back, and we keep that picture, I have that picture in my office in Louisville. It's right there in front of me. And we went back and renamed those categories into what we call the 7Fs of a balanced life. And so they are faith, family and friends, fitness, which is physical, mental, emotional fitness, fun, finances, focus on career, and then the last one we had to make up, we call it free gifts, but it's
volunteer.
Where do we volunteer? How do we give ourselves away? And we've shared the 7Fs with lots of our couples. The other thing that we have done, and actually we need to go back and do it again, because 5 years ago, we did Elizabeth and Stephen's Future View 2025. And we took those 7Fs and we said, what do we want our life to look like in the year 2025? And we have that picture of that storyboard. And I'm highly confident, I haven't looked at it for a little while, but that if we go back and look at that storyboard, that the life we're living today is exactly what the vision was 5 years ago. And so your life is not always going to be in perfect balance. And particularly when you're younger and you're raising kids and you're building your career, that it gets out of balance. But if you have the awareness to bring it back into balance, or recognize which part of it is out of balance and think about, is this something that we want to work on? Maybe it's okay for now to be out of balance, but we're at least have the awareness that, well, maybe we're not having as much fun as we used to have. There's a lot of stress right now with all the stuff we're going through with kids and school and money and all of those issues. So just having that awareness and then making some conscious choices
to people who are listening
about
to Stephen
what we want our life to look like.
If you feel like that's a lot of work for a marriage, I want to say, yeah, it is. We run our businesses better than we run our marriages. And so, if you are running a business and Dave Ramsey talks about this all the time. It's like we have budgets for our businesses, but why do we not have a budget for our personal finances? Like that's as important, if not more important, to do that. The same is true. I felt like I was stuck the first 2 or 3 years in our marriage. I was like, I have nothing to contribute. I am terrible at the day-to-day things, at managing what needs to happen today, tomorrow, the next day. I barely can make, everyday work for myself. I need multiple people pointing me where to go and what to do next. It was when I started realizing, no, I can use my gifts of vision casting and my gifts of inspiration and my gifts of communication and teach those kind of things I can use in my marriage to help us focus on what we're trying to achieve. That's all. And Monica felt like, I feel like I'm just telling this guy what to do all the time. And it allowed us to both bring our strengths to the marriage in a way that I think has helped us for the long haul figure out what this looks like. So if you're like, man, vision 2025 for my marriage, is that necessary? I don't say it's not necessarily necessary, but figure out what works for you. If you, I think Andy Stanley says that everyone ends up somewhere, but rarely do people end up there on purpose, right? And so if you want to end up somewhere in your marriage, create a picture of what you want it to look like. What is that vision of what you want your marriage to look like? And then once you paint that picture, now manage that. John Maxwell says it this way: successful people make major decisions of their life early and manage them daily. And so figure out what that is. I'm going to jump in here.
Yes.
What are some habits, practices, boundaries that have helped you in your marriage?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. And I think some of the biggest thing is, we talk about communication, but you just can't say it enough. You know Bob Russell, and he was our senior minister. He baptized us many years ago. And I am one of these people that takes notes in sermons. And as you know, because I'm always confirming with you at the end of them going, what did you say about this? And so one time in a sermon, and it has to be 25 years ago, Bob made a statement that has stuck with me that I have shared over and over and over. And that is, assume positive intentions while checking out the facts. So I want to start by assuming Stephen means well. He's not here to push my buttons. He is not here to put me down. He is not here to make my life hard. He loves me. And I got to remember that. And that sometimes that slips away and we forget that. So if I will just check on myself, and I think even though we talk about marriage counseling and therapy and all of this, you've got to do your own personal work too. You've got to be able to look in the mirror. So those kinds of things to say, well, wait a minute. So that means reading regularly, being in a small group, making sure that you continue your own prayer life and that you recognize how much you are loved, and that piece of self-confidence in Christ is foundational. That's just foundational to me. And so if I remember those things and I focus on them minute by minute and daily in all parts of my life, then when it comes to Stephen, I see him with the eyes of Christ. And I see him that he loves me. I love him. In fact, as part of our vows, we said, we're here through all the changes in our lives, no matter what. Our stake is in the ground. And so remembering those kinds of things and just assuming those positive intentions, I think, is one big thing. Getting help, absolutely, individually and together, learning to speak the truth in love, absolutely in love, not just speaking truth and saying you did this and you did that. I feel very fortunate because I've had a lot of training in my executive coaching and a lot of clients that I've worked with. So I'm always mastering those skills of questioning and assuming positive intentions. And the other thing is be curious, not judgmental, so that when something happens, it's not, well, you did this or that was stupid, because language creates feelings and feelings spark emotions. So we have to be careful what we say and the words that we use in our language. But if I can say, Stephen I see him behaving this way. I wonder what's going on with him, and not take everything personal. And I had a lot of work to do with that personal piece of it because I'm a little bit more sensitive in some ways, but
that was
he also
Bob
is
Russell's
very
quote was
sensitive
assume
some other ways.
positive
So
while checking out the facts.
assume
That's
positive intentions while checking out the facts. Okay. Because then once you start checking out facts, you go, well, wait a minute. Is that true? So you see really that nasty and ugly and terrible that's going through my head at the moment? Well, no, he's a wonderful man. He's kind. He's the most generous. And I want to go through all of the attributes that I know about him. Stephen is the most generous person of anyone I have ever known and ever met in my entire life. He'd give you anything, anytime. Here it is. Take it.
That's good. That's good.
And so, I've learned a lot.
Well, hey,
let's
go ahead and end our time together. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your struggles and victories and how God has shaped you and molded you through your marriage to fall more in love with each other and more in love with Him. I want to end on this question. What advice do you have that would you give someone who is in a struggling marriage, who is barely hanging on?
Well, I've thought about that because you shared the questions ahead of time, and I think there are 4 or 5 things. One is obviously to put your stake in the ground and recognize that all of our marriages have ups and downs, but as long as our stake is in the ground and that's what Christ wants us to do, that becomes the first piece. Then the second is pray. And we pray daily together and separately. We pray before every meal. We pray before meals in restaurants. And matter of fact, this is a little side, one of the fun things we do is ask the server, we're about to say a blessing. Is there something that we can pray for you about? And it's very interesting, the responses we get. Probably the best response, we were in Key West a couple of weeks ago at an outdoor restaurant, sitting on the sand at a table, and the server came up and we said, we're about to pray.
Yeah.
How can we pray for you?
Oh, that's great.
He said, may I pray? And we said, well, yeah. And he said the blessing for us.
That's beautiful.
So pray. Worship.
Yeah.
As you know, not everybody comes every week. And we feel it's really important to be in that pattern of worshiping every week, unless there's some specific reason why we're somewhere else. And then being with your Christian friends and minimizing relationships with non-Christian friends who are a negative influence.
Sure.
And I emphasize who are negative influence because we have some non-Christian friends that we still minister to, we still try to be role models for.
Yeah. That's good.
But
that's great.
We spend a lot of time.
Anything you'd
with
want to
our
add to that,
Christian
Elizabeth?
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the things I said is get some help and recognize that that it's a two-way. It's both people. It's never just one. But when we're hurting, we start blaming. And so we have to be able to get some way to start seeing things a
you
little
see
more
why
objectively.
these two people I really love, and they're good friends of mine. And so I'm hopefully meeting my friends today will be helpful for you as you are in your own marriages, in your own relationships. Hopefully there's some things you can glean from Stephen and Elizabeth's story. And Stephen, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time, taking some time to share your story. We believe that we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And so you sharing your story is so powerful for us today. And so, man, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys next time on Huffer and Friends. Have a wonderful, blessed day. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Scott.